Hello, my name is Ian Hawkins and you're listening to The Y Word, the program that gets under the skin of artists, entrepreneurs, creators and anybody that makes things happen to ask why they do what they do. Hold on to your hats because coming up later in the program, you will hear this.
And this particular time I went down, picked up the Radio Times, BBC Two, Tuesday night, 9 o'clock, and the title was Wheelie Rubbish. Now it takes three quarters of an hour to an hour out of my day just doing physiotherapy, taking 20, 30 odd pills a day as well on the medication side. But for me, that's my normal. But mentally, I kind of just see myself as a normal person, and CF is just something I keep behind a wall. I think looking back, it was an incredibly strong life lesson, a very harsh one, but one that made me realise my time was going to be shorter than most, and I needed to make the most of it rather than worry about the inevitable.
Today's guest is not just an inventor and not just an entrepreneur. He's also a survivor. Born with cystic fibrosis, Rob Law has defied expectations of doctors to live well into adulthood. And he's also invented the Trunki, which is a familiar sight to anyone who's been to an airport. Rob Law, welcome to The Y Word.
Thanks for having us, Ian.
Well, I'm delighted to have you. First of all, Trunkis, if people don't know, are those really cute little suitcases on wheels that small people spin around on the flat floors of airports on. So you say you're a problem solver who sees a problem and just has to solve it. So Rob, what is the problem that a Trunki solves?
I guess it comes down to kids getting a bit bored with the mundanity of travelling through airports. And the original idea was to create a device that would allow them to ride on their own luggage, taking inspiration from children's ride-on toys, but sculpt it and make it ergonomic so that a child could comfortably sit on it, give it a bit of character, so the kids can fall in love with them, and it'd be a real benefit to parents to get them from A to B in record time. So really we have two customers, both the parent who wants utility and functionality and the child who really wants to have personality and to make friends with this product.
Do people really fall in love with it, Rob? I mean, it's cute, but are they how invested emotionally are people in their luggage?
Oh, it's brilliant. I mean, we get photos of kids having their birthday cakes in shapes of Trunkis. Lots of parents email us to tell us that their kids have taken their Trunkis to bed with them. I guess it's because they're quite animalistic. They become their own little pet. And they actually go on a nice long journey with the child for at least 5 years. They come with a 5-year guarantee. And this Trunki has been with them through really key memory-making moments of visiting different countries or going to visit grandma and all these kind of key, exciting stages.
I think I've located the origins of this Trunki, which is that in the film Airplane, there are two wheel-along suitcases that scrap at each other like dogs. Is that, be honest, Rob, is that where it came from?
Classic, yes. The idea actually came to me while I was a 19-year-old product design student studying at Northumbria University, and the class were asked to enter a national luggage design competition. So I went along to a local department store looking for inspiration in the luggage section and noted at the time hard-moulded suitcases were quite fashionable by the brands like Samsonite and Carlton, but they're all black and boring and kind of didn't really find much more inspiration there. And I guess because I'm a bit of a big kid at heart, I found myself in the kids' toy section, drawn by the bright colours, looking at the ride-on toys, reminiscing about how my younger brother used to ride his ride-on tractor relentlessly around the garden. But actually the manufacturing technology to make these toys wastes a lot of that internal space, and just thought, why not marry that manufacturing technology from the adult luggage that's really popular at the moment, but make it really functional as a ride-on toy. So that's where the idea actually was born back in 97.
Wow, 1997. So that's going back a few years. It wasn't exactly a smooth ride to success, was it? I mean, you did Dragon's Den. I've talked to a few people that like the idea of Dragon's Den, but your experience wasn't fantastic. So where did it all go wrong?
No, I think we're semi-famous for being the most well-known rejection on Dragon's Den. But I guess taking a quick step back, I won the competition. The judges took me aside and said, you've got quite a commercial idea here, you should try and license it. So I approached luggage manufacturers, telling them we're going to revolutionise children's travel together. And they very politely told me I'd invented a toy, so I should go and see a toy company. And the toy manufacturers kind of did the reverse and told me, go and see luggage companies. So it took 7 years before I could try and get the product to market. I finally found a toy company to license it to. They had it for 3 years, secured a global licensing deal, was really looking forward to these royalty checks flooding in, and they went pop 3 years later, having only secured one customer in Saudi Arabia. So Trunki had never really conquered any shores, really. 2 weeks after that first container arrived and I decided to do it myself, I took Trunki on Dragon's Den. Really, I'm a trained product designer, I had no business training. I just really knew I had a product and a brand that I wanted to bring to market. Yeah, so I took them on the Den. I had no real money. I'd taken out a 10,000 personal loan to buy that first container. I had no real business knowledge, and I could do with a bit of marketing exposure, and I certainly got one of those things. It aired in September 2006. Season 3, the pitch had gone perfectly in front of the Dragons, towed Richard Farley, the Aussie guy, around the studio, and at some point, Trixie the pink Trunki turned up at Theo Thetis' feet, who's kind of renowned now for heavy product testing, should we say, and he ended up kind of grappling with this pink Trunki and ripping off her toe strap, which made a great bit of theatrical TV, and sadly all the Dragons jumped on this and thought, Peter Jones told me my business was worthless. Deborah Meaden didn't see the business opportunity. Duncan just didn't like the business. And they all kind of went out. Richard Farley was my actual target because I knew he had toddlers. So he saw the other guys had gone out and he wanted half my company. I was only prepared to give away 10% for that 100,000. Might have gone to 20, but definitely not half. So I left empty-handed, quite literally, because I did sell Richard the 2 Trunkis I took on the show, gave him a Dragon's Den discount.
I always think Dragon's Den is brilliant if you have a product that the person on the other side of the screen can get. It's less good for those big conceptual things. But if it's like a bottle of sauce or indeed a suitcase, it works in its own terms. People will want to buy it whether or not the Dragons do. Is that a fair comment?
That certainly turned out to be the case, but at the time, I really wish I'd invented a time machine and not a ride-on suitcase. The BBC told me they'll give me about 6 weeks advance notice before it aired, and I kept waiting for this email to come into my inbox and never got one. It became the penultimate episode of season 3, and every week I'll go down to local newsagents, pick up the Radio Times and try and find out whether there's any hint I might be on. And this particular time I went down, picked up the Radio Times, BBC 2, Tuesday night, 9 o'clock, and the title was Wheelie Rubbish. So the colour drained from my face, and I knew it was going to be car crash telly, but I hadn't quite imagined to this kind of extent. Now, I didn't think I was going to sell many, and I might have to close the business the next day, but I did think I was going to get a lot of web traffic to my website, so I might as well grasp that opportunity, post a survey up and just garner further feedback from customers about the marketing message or the product. And that night when the programme aired, over 2,000 people filled in this survey with phenomenal words of support. They really got the product, and we sold out that night as well. And the challenge I always had was manufacturers didn't get it, investors didn't get it, and retailers didn't get it, but consumers did. And that was a real kind of turning point for the business, having for 9 years then, struggling to get this product to market, to have finally bullseyed the demographic and the market.
There's a bit in your book, which is, I've got to say, is a really good book, and we will come on to it later, Rob. But it's about the idea of a patent versus a brand and why a brand is more valuable than a patent. Just what was the thinking behind that?
Well, I guess it was partly down to circumstances. You can't actually patent a concept for a ride-on suitcase. You can patent the way the wheels fix if it's innovative or the way the catches work, but you can't patent the concept. So to me, it was about getting a really strong brand around the product, a lifestyle brand. So it's not toys, it's not luggage. It's actually a lifestyle brand that helps people travel with their families. And brands are so much harder to copy than products. We've had umpteen copies of Trunki over the years, at least 30 odd attempts, but they've just copied the concept of a ride-on suitcase off us, taking a lot of the design cues, but no one's invested in a brand behind it. And that's what really is the more aspirational point. We've got close to 100,000 followers on our Facebook account, very active, engaged community. And people don't just want products, they want to buy into more of a lifestyle product that they can engage with. And that's really partly the power of branding. It's trying to do more than just create a product.
In many ways, then, Dragon's Den was more of it wasn't so much a setback, it was more a blessing in disguise, would you say?
Absolutely. Looking back now, I wouldn't change a thing. It all just worked out perfectly, but it was very hard to see that at the time. Every time there's a new series of Dragon's Den, one of the tabloids will mention us as one that got away. I actually had Theo come to visit us a few years later on a catch-up show, and he came to visit me in my first office, and I presented him with a Herculean trunky where I'd replaced the toe strap hooks with padlocks, and had a bit of banter with him then.
What are your top tips for somebody that's thinking about going on Dragon's Den now?
I guess from my experience, you kind of do need to create a bit of theatre to make that memorable episode, and to get that 10-minute slot. So yeah, there's a lot of competition for that final edit. So yeah, just think about really why you're on there. Clearly you're on there for the money and ideally the mentoring, but there's a great marketing opportunity there. So try and figure out how you may be able to maximize that opportunity.
I have to say, I didn't plan this podcast to be like this, but we do seem to have had a couple of people that have come on the show that have also done bits of reality telly. We've had Margaret Heffernan, who did Secret Millionaire. We've had Ayesha Massoud and Dan Lassman, who've both done The Apprentice. And they always say, you have to play up, you have to be entertaining. It's not about what you're doing, it's how you do it. And is that sort of a good lesson for branding in general?
I mean, we've been trading for 15 years now. And if you try and think back 15 years ago, business was pretty dry and boring, and Innocent Drinks, they were really quite pioneering. So I took a few leaves from their book. We had funky job titles. We tried to have a bit of humour with our messaging with customers, and customer service was a really key point for us in the early days. Due to having a few teething problems with the product and catches pop open and things, I always used a bit of humour to win round a customer. And 15 years ago, you picked up the phone to call customer service. You kind of had gritted teeth and you were ready for a battle, weren't you? It was way before customer service became really important. So I think from a marketing point of view, coming back to your marketing point, there's no point in investing in advertising unless you haven't got a really great product that people can champion, and also really strong customer service that support that dialogue with customers.
I think it's a nice idea. You're on a big TV show and you've got 4 people who say, we hate your product, but you'll get the traffic. And so you put something up there that shows why real people actually really love it. That's like quite a smart idea.
Yeah, another thing I wanted to do was really tell my story, because obviously there's the edited version and there's the real version, which no one ever hears about. So I was very keen to try and get my story across without sounding bitter. And the solution now was simply writing up a children's tale of Terence, Trixie and the 5 Dragons, as told by the Trunkies, to use a bit of humour and get a bit across what really happened in the den. So that was quite well received too.
When you have one of these cultural moments like that humiliation in the Dragon's Den, people get an idea of you, but it's only a tiny part of your story and who you are and what you've done. I mean, that was one afternoon out of Rob's life, and yet it sort of informed a lot of opinions about him. And I wanted to find out a little bit more about the rest of the story that's under the waterline, about that resilience, about the cystic fibrosis, how that had changed him, how that had affected his attitude, and what it meant to him as a business person, and what it was doing to shape his life going forwards. So you're a product designer by training. So you've got the Trunki, that's big success, big tick. Is that occupying all your time, or is there anything else that you're also putting your talent into?
We've built up Trunki into a whole range of travel products and have a whole portfolio of things, from car seats that turn into backpacks through to kids' swimming bags. So Trunki has now evolved into the global children's travel gear brand. But a couple of years ago, I decided to start taking a bit of a back seat. There are much better people at running the business on the day-to-day than me, so hired some really good guys to be joint MDs. And I've got a great team around me, so that freed me up to spend the time that I can really add value around branding and product development, but also to start a family as well, which was really important to me. And now I've got 3 young, beautiful kids, all under 6, which is quite time-consuming. But it also gives me opportunity to explore other things. So the book has always been on the back burner. A lot of the business speaking gigs I do, whether it be a keynote or to a management team, everyone always says at the end, you should write a story about this. And dealing with the resilience and overcoming the challenges mainly being the theme, possibly around innovation and leadership too, and sometimes marketing. But it was quite interesting that people were so engaged in that story and they didn't even know my backstory and how I came to be quite so resilient. So I thought if I told the true story, which was going quite personal, I might be able to help more people overcome adversity, not just in business, but with health conditions or tragedy and family loss and things like this. So I decided it was time to dig deep.
And not that this is any way comparable to you, but I had one of my lungs collapse, and so I had to have the incline and the wobbles on myself.
Yeah,
and be forced to cough, which is a very unkind thing to do to somebody with pneumonia on one lung and the other one collapsed. But fortunately, I don't have to keep doing that. Do you still have to keep having the physio?
Yeah, so cystic fibrosis is the condition I've got, and that affects essentially the salt balance in your body, which means it's very hard to clear your lungs and they get clogged up with mucus and therefore infections. Very easy to pick up colds. It affects the digestive system. So the first 8 years of my life, I couldn't eat any fat. So I was on a fat-free diet, just eating cottage cheese and carob chocolate. But then a new pill came along and I then flipped almost overnight into a high-fat diet. But for probably the first 20 years, I had to do the incline thing, lots of physiotherapy, and then a device was developed that they called a flutter, which was essentially like a pipe, like a smoking pipe with a ball bearing in, and you blow into it and that vibrates the lungs, but you can do it sitting up. And I've been doing that ever since, really. But it kind of takes, probably now it takes three quarters of an hour to an hour out of my day just doing the physiotherapy, taking 20, 30 odd pills a day as well on the medication side. But for me, that's my normal. But mentally, I kind of just see myself as a normal person, and CF is just something I keep behind a wall. And I have to take those drugs and do that physio, but I never think more of it than just being my normal. And that was an interesting experience when I started the business. When do you tell someone you got CF? And I didn't want anyone's sympathy, so I never really told anyone. And it was only through one of my first work colleagues who took it upon himself to let people know why I kept coughing my guts up on my desk, why I was always coughing and things like this, that a lot more people started to know. But it's something I've kept very close to me, never really talked about, but felt with this book, if I did, it might help others.
On the subject of that, other people telling your story for you, that must have been, I don't know, that must be quite a difficult thing when somebody tells other people that you've got, CF. I mean, ultimately, do you think that's a good thing? Do you think people should know, or where do you sit on that?
Well, within the closed work within the team at work, not so worried about that, because obviously people are going to be asking questions, and if they can be made aware, that's fine, rather than me having to tell them. Yeah, I think now I've achieved so much with the business that, and always never wanting anyone's sympathy. And growing up, my mum was a very strong woman. Whenever me and my twin sister would try and get a bit of sympathy, sorry. She was very empathetic, but not, and things were getting a bit tough for us. She'd just always say, there are always people worse off than you. And that's kind of always been at the back of my mind. Whenever I start trying to go down that self-pity road, I always think, well, there's people much worse off than me, so I just need to pull up my socks and get on with it.
The other thing about you, Rob, is that you have dyslexia, and you've now joined the growing ranks of dyslexic people I know who've got books out, and I've read it, and it's a really good one, which is annoying. So are we, as a society, are we getting better at solving the problem of dyslexia, do you think?
I'm not too sure about that, but I mean, one of the key business skills I've got is about delegation and finding people who are better at me than doing something. So when it came to writing a book, it was absolutely clear to me that I needed some support from a ghostwriter. So working with Dr. Peter Hughes, who I selected in the end, who's a doctor in psychology, a marketeer and an entrepreneur. So quite a lot of synergies there. To get the story out, we're really keen to make it more of a page turner, a bit like a piece of fiction, rather than a dry, boring business book with takeouts and tick boxes and things like this. So yeah, he really added a great skill set there to make it a page turner, keep the narrative flowing, keep people hooked. And we've got some great Amazon reviews reflecting that. So I think it's a great page turner. I read it in 2 days and great things like this. So really pleased we created a very engaging book, but that did mean compromising, and there were various stories I wanted to get in the book, but Peter was like, we've really got to focus on this dialogue and keeping the reader glued and hooked. So didn't find space for some of these stories.
It's incredibly emotional. I mean, the opening chapters are about you and your relationship with your twin sister who passed away when you were 19?
16,
yeah. Beg your pardon. So, I mean, that must be an extraordinary life event. Surely that shaped you quite profoundly.
It did, absolutely. And it was a hugely harrowing and traumatic experience for the family and for me, because she lost her life to cystic fibrosis. And yeah, I think looking back, it was an incredibly strong life lesson, a very harsh one, but one that made me realise my time was going to be shorter than most, and I needed to make the most of it rather than worry about the inevitable. I put CF behind a wall, focused on trying to find my passion, what I could be good at, and that turned out to be design and product design. And from an early age, I finally figured this out, because as a child, you kind of dreamed of being an astronaut or a soldier or whatever it may be, and astronauts and soldiers need strong lungs. So I was quite aware from a very early age I couldn't be these things you dream of being, which kind of helped me also find what I could do, and being in special needs classes at school, being almost branded a dunce and a thicko because of the dyslexia. I kind of really wanted to find out what I could do, and that was using my hands more.
As a reader, you read it and you go, this is impressive. And I notice how often people that are successful entrepreneurs do not have a brilliant educational career necessarily.
Yeah, I quote Sir Ken Robinson in the book, who I didn't know about when I was growing up, but he's run the most famous TED Talk, the most viewed TED Talk, and he talks about how the education system kills creativity. And although I struggled a bit in school, I had a great time at university, but I'm very passionate about education and sit on the board at the local university's business school, because I'm really, really passionate about trying to get people thinking more entrepreneurially. It's a tricky term, entrepreneur. I prefer to use enterprising, because not everyone can be an entrepreneur, because entrepreneur is about taking risks and putting a lot on the line, but people can think very enterprisingly and very creatively to solve the problems.
And do you think that willingness to take risk, partly you have your CF to thank for that?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, you're taking risks all the time. I mean, growing up, should I be going to a swimming pool and swimming where bugs and germs can collate? I mean, I'm not supposed to ever go in a hot tub, because a lot of bacteria can grow around hot tubs. There's always this balancing act of whether you take that risk or not. And now I'm an open water swimming and swim in very green looking lakes with lots of all sorts of things growing. But it's really important for my lungs to get that physical exercise. And actually, physical exercise has played a key role in my survival, my fitness, and setting kind of annual challenges to keep me training and to keep me focused. And one of the things I've kind of realized when I was writing the book, it really surprises me, the power of the mind and how we can achieve things that you really shouldn't be able to. I mean, someone with poor lungs should not be able to run a marathon or half Ironman. And even when I'm doing these events, just the mental power when you're just thinking that you choose something to fight against. So I'm running along, my legs are falling off, in a lot of pain, hitting that wall, and I'm just thinking, if I can run that extra mile, I'm going to be pushing that inevitable fate with CF further down the road. And you can just drive through these things and actually achieve quite a lot. What
do you think it is that has made you be able to push that? You called it the ultimate fate of CF. What has made you able to keep pushing that on?
One of the key learnings is around focusing on the things that you can control and not worry about the things you can't. So I remember from an early age, the cure for cystic fibrosis was potentially just around the corner. A decade later, they were no closer. So I gave up hoping for a cure and just thought, all I need to do is focus on staying as healthy as I can, so that when a cure does turn up, whenever that might be in the future, and I'm not going to spend any time worrying about it, that I will be in the best place to receive that treatment. We're talking now during COVID and lockdown and the business. We're in the travel sector, so we're affected by the lack of flights going. But I can't influence when the government's going to lift those travel bans. What I can focus on is controlling costs. I can control my marketing message, so I won't talk about traveling to airports anymore. It's all about staycations, visiting grandma, camping trips. Overcoming challenges of any shape or size takes a huge amount of mental energy. So if you can really use your energy wisely, as I say, focus on those things you can control, it gives you a lot more stamina and durability to, well, I guess we call it resilience now, to overcome these challenges and to then have the energy to look for the opportunities.
I've got to say, Rob, it is remarkable how here we are in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic and a disease that affects lungs. And as soon as you brought it up, you started talking about how it's going to affect your business and not how it's going to affect you. Have you been particularly cautious, or have you seen it as another problem to solve?
I'm one of the guys that got a letter from the NHS saying I should be shielded. In theory, I shouldn't really be leaving the front door. But again, exercise is really important to me, and going out in the evenings when it's a lot quieter, running or cycling is certainly something I've been doing. And trying to look too far into the future is quite disconcerting and worrying what's going to happen this autumn, winter. So again, it's just focusing back in on the daily challenges, not getting too carried away about the future, and also being grateful for the things you do have. I'm very fortunate to have a nice sized garden that the kids just love living in at the moment, and a decent coffee machine. And it's just feeling gratitude for some of those small things rather than resentment for not being able to do certain things.
Rob, my final question is, you can have a business lunch with anyone you like in the world, alive, dead, fictional, past, present or future. Who are you going to have your business lunch with?
Wow, that is a very good question. I mean, in the early days of running Trunki and actually at university, I was a huge admirer of Apple and Jonathan Ives. And how he was such a product pioneer and created whole new categories of products. So it turned out later he was a bit of a mean leader, and his leadership skills were somewhat questionable, but I think it would probably be Jonathan Ives reincarnated to go for a burger with.
Rob Law, thank you very much for your time on the Y Word.
Thanks, Ian. Pleasure.
As you can hear, we completed our interview just as the Wi-Fi signal started breaking up. Perfect timing. Rob Law's book, 68 Roses and a Trunki, is available now. Definitely worth seeking out if you want to have a story that is moving, powerful, inspiring, and all kinds of other things that business books really ought to be. Thanks to Rob, and thanks to you, dear listener, for joining us on a really quite a roller coaster of a show, really, wasn't it? We've had the Dragon's Den, we've had trauma, we've had life-threatening illness, we've had business success. What more could you want? If you'd like to make any comments on the show, please do find me on LinkedIn. That's where I love to communicate with people. And if you have anybody in mind for a guest on an upcoming show, someone that's changed the world in some way, could be big, could be small, could be kind of random, by all means, do put us in touch with one another and we'll see where we go. If you haven't already, do check out the archive. We've had some fantastic guests. Hit that subscribe button. My name's Ian Hawkins. Have a great time. Till the next time.